There are some winter nights. The cold doesn't just stay outside, it sinks into the very bones of the house. It's one of those nights when the wind isn't just hitting the window. It feels like it's watching you. That night in 2019 was exactly like that. I live alone in a small house along the roadside, just outside the town. The road to the city is single lane. During the day, few vehicles pass except for a couple of pickups and a mail truck. At night, the road turns completely silent. The snow makes the asphalt, the lanes, the whole world the same white. I'm used to winter. This is the cost of living here. Brutal winds, blocked roads, frequent power outages. I have a generator in the yard, but I run it sparingly so I don't have to restart it every time. That night, the power had been out for hours. Only the orange glow of the fireplace lit the inside of the house. I was stretched out on the couch in the living room. My eyes were growing heavy. As I watched the shadows of the flames moving on the wall, I thought, it might be nice to take a nap. Just as my eyes were closing, I heard a very faint sound at the door. It wasn't quite a knock. It was more like someone hesitantly brushing against the handle. When the second sound came, I sat up instantly. A slight uneasiness washed over me. It was almost impossible for anyone to be around at that hour. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. Outside was pure white. The snowstorm had erased every outline, even hiding the porch from view. But as my eyes adjusted to the dark, I noticed a dark shape standing in front of the yard, a man. His shoulders slumped, his head lowered, his face unreadable. The storm blurred his outline, making him seem almost unreal. He took a step. I thought he was heading toward the door, but he shifted direction and walked toward the side of the house. A sharp uneasiness settled in my stomach. A normal person, especially in this weather, would knock, call out, ask for help. They wouldn't wander around the house. I hurried to the kitchen window. The dim firelight cast a faint reflection across the glass. What I saw when I opened the curtain was even more unsettling. The man was climbing onto the roof. He was using the snowbanks as steps, pulling himself up by the eaves. His knees trembled, and white flakes fell as his boots crushed the snow. He never looked up. He seemed fixed only on climbing higher. In that moment, I even forgot to scream. Sometimes you freeze not because you're scared, but because nothing makes sense. That was exactly how it felt right then. Then came a faint scraping sound from the chimney. It wasn't the wind. It sounded like someone trying to lift the metal cap. And that's when I understood what he wanted. He'd given up on the door. He was trying to reach the chimney. Maybe he had seen the firelight outside. Or maybe with hypothermia, he could no longer tell what was warm or safe. My phone had no signal. Still, there was one chance. If I went outside, maybe the wind would shift and I could catch a single bar to make a call. This was high ground. Sometimes storms created brief pockets of signal, but going outside meant walking right under the roof. I stood at the door for a moment. My hands were trembling, not from cold, but from fear. 1,000 possibilities ran through my mind, and none of them made any sense. Finally, I grabbed my coat. Just then, a chunk of snow slid off the edge of the roof. The man was still up there. There was no doubt about it. The second I stepped outside, the cold knocked the air out of me. The wind slammed into my face. The snow burned my eyes. I shut the door tightly behind me and checked the phone in my pocket. 1 bar. Weak, but there I don't know how. Maybe the storm eased for a moment. Maybe my angle toward the tower was better. But that single bar felt like life itself. My fingers were numb, but I dialed the number. As I called 911, my eyes kept drifting back to the roof. The phone rang. Then finally, someone picked up. 911, what is your emergency? I managed to answer in a low voice. There's someone on my roof. Please send a team. That was all. One sentence. I didn't have the strength to explain anything more. snowflakes hit the screen and slid away. The operator said only one thing: "The team is on its way, stay safe." Just then, a muffled creak echoed from above. I looked up and saw movement near the edge of the roof. He looked like he lost his balance, one foot slipped. He tried to grip the snow-covered eaves but failed. He slid off the roof and hit the ground with a heavy thud. I froze where I stood. The man fell to his knees and stayed there for a moment without raising his head. Then he tried to stand but stumbled again. The storm had eased a bit, letting me see his face more clearly. His beard was frozen. His coat was torn, one sleeve blackened, burn marks, but it was his eyes that caught me. Glassy, unfocused, vacant. He tried to speak, but the wind swallowed his voice. He couldn't stand. He slumped against the side of the house. He stayed there. I didn't go near him. I just watched from a distance. Minutes later, red and blue lights shimmered through the snow at the top of the road. A police car crawled toward the house. The officers approached him with flashlights. The man didn't react at all. When one of them bent down and held his arm, I heard him mumble in a dazed voice, "My car broke down." His voice was barely there. The officers leaned in closer. The man struggled to move his jaw. Then he shut his eyes. He looked like he had no strength left to open them again. He whispered just 2 more words. "I'm so cold." When paramedics arrived, they opened his coat and wrapped him in a blanket. As they carried him toward the ambulance, one officer turned to me. "Are you okay?" I just nodded. I couldn't say anything. When morning came, the area around the house was quiet. The tracks left by the police looked like lines drawn across the snow. I climbed up to the edge of the roof. It was clear where he had climbed. Deep footprints in the snow, darkened boards where he gripped the eaves. A faint burn mark on the metal chimney cap, probably from his frozen hands trying to force it open. All the evidence confirmed the night had happened, but confirmation didn't bring comfort. When I looked inside the chimney, a chill still crept up my back, as if a pair of eyes were still watching from the dark. People accept logic, but feelings, they don't give up that easily. Even now, sometimes, if I hear a faint ticking inside the fireplace, I can't stop myself from wondering, what if that night he had made it just a little closer? And that thought keeps me cold for a long time, long after any winter storm. Some evenings, no matter how violently the storm lashes outside, you still feel safe within your home. It feels as if the world beyond the door belongs to someone else entirely. That evening, I felt exactly the same. I live alone in my house north of town. Most evenings, I get home from work, heat up some terrible food in the microwave, then turn on the TV and drift off. That night was no different. The TV was low, the electric heater ticking softly. Outside, a snowstorm was raging, but inside it was warm. Oddly enough, that warmth makes you a bit too comfortable. It was around 9 o'clock. As I stepped into the kitchen to pour myself some hot coffee, a sharp crash sounded outside. "Must be the trash can," I muttered. In this town, the wind tossing trash cans around was nothing new. Still, I walked to the door to check. In front of the small porch, the trash can had toppled in the snowdrifts. The storm made visibility awful. The snow was blowing sideways. Just as I began to close the door, I noticed something. There were footprints beside the can, footprints leading to the can, and footprints leading toward my house. But there were no tracks going back. For a moment, my heart dropped. I tried to tell myself it was an animal, but the prints were large, like human steps. I couldn't see clearly in the storm, but something about them felt deeply wrong to me. I shut the door quickly. I turned the lock on the front door. A heavy unease settled over me. No one could have come inside, I whispered to myself. Even I didn't believe that. I strained my ears as if trying to catch anything. The house was perfectly silent until I heard a very clear footstep from upstairs. Considering I lived alone, that sound hit me like a blow to the stomach. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe for a moment. Then another step and another. Slow, deliberate footsteps that made it obvious someone was walking through the rooms. My phone was on the kitchen counter. I moved toward it slowly. Even my feet pressing into the carpet felt too loud. As I reached for the phone, I noticed something else. The guest room door was half open. I was absolutely sure I had closed that door hours earlier. I never forget small details. Not in this house, not in this kind of solitude. My throat went dry. With trembling fingers, I picked up the phone and called the police station. I explained everything to the officer in a low whisper. He told me the units would be delayed because of the snowstorm. He didn't even know for how long. In weather like this, the town is completely cut off. When I hung up, my breathing grew shallow. I knew I had to hide. The footsteps were no longer upstairs. They were downstairs. Someone was moving through the house, slow and heavy, each step making the floorboards creak. First, I heard the cupboard door open. Then it shut. Drawers sliding open in the kitchen. Every sound echoed through the house, pressing me into the walls. King. I hurried to my bedroom upstairs. I shut the door and turned the lock. When my back hit the door, my heart was pounding so loudly it drowned out the footsteps. I reached under the nightstand and pulled out the electric shock device I'd bought a while ago. I had bought it just in case. Turns out, that was a good idea. I pressed the button. The tip flared with a bluish spark and crackled briefly. That tiny flicker gave me more comfort than I'd ever admit. The footsteps below stopped. Then a new rhythm began. Footsteps climbing the stairs. Slow, steady, never rushed. Like a man fully aware of where he was going and every step he took. At the top of the stairs was my bedroom, directly across. The footsteps halted. The man was now at my door. The handle turned slowly. The lock clicked. He tried again. Harder this time. Then he paused. And then, a heavy kick hit the door. The door rattled. A groan escaped me, and I immediately covered my mouth to stifle it. When the second kick landed, the frame groaned. By the third, I knew it wouldn't hold. And on the fourth, the door burst inward. My mind froze for a moment as the man lunged inside. I threw myself at him and instinctively drove the stun gun forward with all my strength. A blue flash lit up the darkness. He screamed, convulsed, and crashed to the floor. Without a single breath, I jumped up and bolted outside. The storm slapped my face with freezing, painful cold, but I didn't care. I ran. The road was buried in snow, but as my feet plunged in and out, my only thought was staying alive. Moments later, I heard sirens in the distance. For the first time, that sound felt beautiful. When the police car stopped in front of the house, I was still gasping for breath, my hands shaking. An officer rushed out. "Hey, are you okay?" he shouted. I nodded, unable to speak. He grabbed my arm and guided me beside the vehicle. At that moment, another officer entered the house. As I tried to stay upright on the snowy road, I heard a short exchange on the officer's radio. "There's someone inside the house, probably down, I'm checking." A few minutes later, the second officer came out, raising his flashlight as he walked toward us. "Yeah," he said with a sharp breath. "The man's inside, unconscious but alive, probably from the stun gun." Hearing that sent a strange wave through me. Relief tangled with fear. The officer scanned the room with his flashlight for a moment, then turned to me. "Any sign of a break-in?" he asked. "I heard a noise upstairs," I said. "That door, a door I didn't open, and there were footprints by the trash can." The officer nodded and turned to the other. "Check the back door." Something turned cold inside me. The back door. I hadn't gone near that part of the house since the evening. It was always hard to close, but I had checked it carefully. That morning, I was certain I'd locked it. The officer circled around the house through the storm. His light cut faintly through the dark as he walked. I held my breath, watching him move as if in slow motion. Finally, his voice rang out. "Hey, do you see this?" The other officer and I immediately headed to the back. My legs trembled. I felt cold even inside my boots. The officer was pointing his flashlight at the back door lock. At first glance, the door looked completely shut. The lock looked engaged, but he pushed the door lightly with his palm. It creaked open. A hollow feeling opened inside me. "The lock mechanism is broken," the officer said. "It only looks closed. It doesn't actually hold." I swallowed hard. And in that moment, I finally understood the weight I had felt all night. And at that moment, only one thought filled my head. I thought the door was locked. He was already inside. I was 27 when this happened. I live at the end of the old road north of town. There's a gravel road leading into the woods that hasn't been repaired in years. It's often buried in snow, especially on winter nights like this. My house is a small, single-story cabin, the kind even the mailman struggles to find, only visible on the map when you zoom in all the way. The idea of living alone had appealed to me for years. But that night, loneliness meant something entirely different. It was past 11 o'clock. I had just gotten into bed. The last sparks in the fireplace were fading away. Just as my eyes were closing, I heard the sound of an engine outside. Not unusual, but here, at this hour, in weather like this, the engine revved, sped up, then suddenly cut off. Right after, there was a muffled thud, as if someone had buried their vehicle deep into a snowdrift. I got out of bed and went to the window, but visibility was almost nothing. The blizzard was so thick I couldn't see even an inch beyond the glass. Maybe I heard wrong, I thought, but the storm whispering from the darkness suggested something else. You are not alone. Minutes passed. I heard nothing but the roar of the wind. Then came a sound like a faint vibration, the sound of snow being crushed. Footsteps. The first step, then the second, then a third dragged behind it. It felt like someone wasn't walking, but forcing their legs through deep snow. I held my breath. There was no knock at the door. No voice, only uneven footsteps circling the house. Sometimes close, sometimes distant, stopping every now and then in long stretches of silence. Then the footsteps stopped, right in front of the window. The curtain shifted slightly. I hadn't moved, and it wasn't the wind. That tiny flutter. It came from someone standing outside. I had turned on the camp lantern. The light was weak, but it lit part of the window. That's when I noticed something on the glass. Vapor, a blurred oval about 3 fingers wide. Someone had leaned close enough to breathe onto the window. A chill ran through me. The footsteps moved away. Snow crunched again. But this time a voice followed. Not a whisper, not a groan. More like a muffled cry pushed out of a collapsing chest. Open! Help! The voice was exhausted yet strangely steady. There was no frantic panic, more like breath forced out through frustration, and not from fear, but instinct. Something stopped me from going to the door. I took a step, then froze. I didn't reach for the handle. And right then, a loud sound came from behind the house. The door of the old woodshed, that familiar crack of wood I'd known since childhood. I turned off the light instantly. I dropped to my knees. In the dark, pressed against the wall, I held my breath. Another crack followed, as if someone was ramming the woodshed door with their shoulder. A struggle, then a long creak, then silence. Only the wind minutes passed, but the feeling didn't change. I sensed someone wandering outside, moving from the door to the window, from the window to the shed, pausing to listen. Their steps leaving uneven, tired, muffled prints in the snow. There was no one else here. Walking to town, impossible. Anyone who knows storms knows that the moment you step outside, you lose your direction. My only option inside the house was the old emergency radio transmitter in the corner. It had been left here years ago for campers who might get lost. I had never tested it. The device was so old that when I powered it on, I could feel the circuits trembling inside. It clicked twice, coughed once, then crackled as it searched for a signal. At last, the speaker filled with faint static. Noise, received, repeat. Then another dull voice came through. Received, repeat your location. Just then I heard a deep moan from outside, followed immediately by the sound of a body collapsing into the snow. I left the transmitter on. I ran to the door. Through the fogged window, I saw a silhouette curled in the middle of the snowdrift. His shoulders shook, his breath drifting into the night as white vapor. He was covered in motor oil. One hand was bright red, not from cold, but from blistered, cracked skin, as if he had been walking for hours, freezing for hours, about to fall for hours. The man didn't move until the police and ambulance arrived. I didn't dare bring him inside, but I couldn't look away. Finally, sirens pierced the storm. The officers dug their way to him through the snow. His face was purple. I heard the one sentence he managed to say through trembling lips. I saw someone. The paramedic asked questions, but the man barely understood what he was saying. His skin was purple, his breathing uneven. He kept repeating that he saw someone, but couldn't name who. It was like he glimpsed them once, then froze, unsure of anything. After they carried him away, the police inspected the area. The shattered woodshed door, the scattered tracks around the house, the fogged window. They examined everything, piece by piece. They asked questions, but I couldn't answer clearly. I wasn't even sure how much of what I'd seen I remembered right. When the police left, the house fell silent again. I didn't sleep that night. The sound of those footsteps in the snow still echoed in my ears. The snow had stopped by morning. The first thing I noticed when I stepped outside was the blood-smeared handprints beside the door. I walked around back. The woodshed door was broken, but the tracks on the ground were wrong. The man's footprints led only to the front. He had never gone behind the house. Then I looked closely at the prints. The footprints behind the house stopped abruptly at one point. They didn't continue into the forest or toward the road. It was as if someone had stood there, then vanished. A dark shape caught my eye in the snow. I bent down and picked up a small piece of black fabric. It was stiff from the cold, like melted plastic. The man hadn't worn anything like it. I turned it over in my hand. I didn't know who left it, but I knew one thing. Last night, that man wasn't the only one out here. I went inside and locked the door. I sat in front of the fireplace for a long time. Every clue made sense on its own, yet none of them fit together. and that feeling in my gut. I knew the ring of steam on the glass had formed long before the man arrived. Someone had stood there through the storm, watching the house. Some traces fade by morning, some vanish under the snow. But the presence of whoever stood outside that night, it won't leave my mind for a long time.